All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome back to the X Zone, everyone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the Mutual Broadcast Network and on the IPBN Radio Network. If you'd like to send an email, studio@xzoneradiotv.com, on all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV, and our radio website at www.xzoneradio.com. My guest this hour, X-Zone Nation, is Boyd C. Purcell. He is a board-certified chaplain, a national board-certified counselor, a licensed professional counselor, and an ordained Presbyterian minister. Educationally, he has a Bachelor of Science degree in Comprehensive Social Studies, World, European, American History, Political Science, etc. He has also a Master of Arts degree in Counseling, a Master of Divinity degree in Biblical Studies, and a Doctorate of Philosophy degree in the integration of psychology and theology. He has over 40 years of experience in counseling, agency, clinical, pastoral, psychiatric hospital, schools, substance abuse, private practice, teaching counseling courses in the counseling department of Marshall University Graduate College, providing spiritual care at the end of life for hospice patients. Dr. Purcell is also the author of a 5-star rated book, I should say books, plural, on Amazon.com, Spiritual Terrorism, Spiritual Abuse from the Womb to the Tomb, and Christianity Without Insanity for Optimal Mental, Emotional, Physical Health. Joining me now is Dr. Boyd Purcell. And Boyd, welcome back to the X Zone.
Rob, thank you very much. It's good to be with you.
It's great having you with us again, Boyd. These are crazy times, Boyd. I'd like to go and talk about what happened in Orlando, Florida. It's been in the news. It still is in the news. People are still getting over the shock and of the event. And as a member of the clergy, what light at the end of the tunnel can you point us at?
Well, I'm not sure the light is there yet, but I'm confident there is light at the end of the tunnel. And actually, Christian conservatives, those who identify themselves especially as Bible-believing Christians, keep saying, I've heard this my whole life. I was really terrorized by this as a child. You know, the world is a horrible place. It's getting worse every day in every way, and will continue to get worse until the Lord splits the eastern sky of the clouds of glory with the second coming of the Lord Jesus Christ. Now, that's good news for those who believe they're going to heaven, but for most Christians are taught that conservatives, only a handful of people are going to heaven, and the vast majority of people are going to be condemned to hellfire forever. So that's really bad news. So in my study of world history, and undergraduate school, and European history, American history, church history seminary, I believe, and I say this to people and they seem shocked, the world is better today than any time in the history of the world. If anyone has any doubt about that, just read the book of Judges in the Old Testament, how bad things were then. So things as bad as they are, including Orlando, things in the world are better than they have been, and I trust they will get better. They may get worse before they get better. But Orlando is a good example of homophobia. The person there was ostensibly a Muslim, but a very confused one, if he actually was a Muslim. I'll accept his word for that, he was. But he swore allegiance to ISIS, or ISIL, before he killed 49 people and injured 53 more. But he also was apparently sworn some allegiance to Hezbollah. Now, those two organizations are anathema to each other. ISIL is a Sunni organization, the Sunni branch of Islam, and Hezbollah is a branch of the Shia, and that's basically equivalent to Catholics and Protestants in the Christian faith. So he's a very confused individual, and he may in fact have been a self-loathing homosexual himself.
All right. Boyd, we've got to take a break. Please stand by. X Zone Nation. Boyd Purcell is our very special guest. And we'll be back on the other side of this 2-minute break as we continue here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the Mutual Broadcast Network and the all-new IPBN radio network. Unwilling to be the government's deadly assassin, gifted psychic Kahara Mitchell went AWOL and ended up buried under rubble in the wake of a great tsunami. She regained consciousness far from Earth on the medical ship of a Daguerrean intergalactic fleet. Has she been rescued or abducted by aliens? The Chalice of Carrie, Kahira O'Donnell's latest paranormal science fiction romance, is the passionate story of an Earth woman and her destined mates, twin kings from another galaxy. Kahara uses her gifts fighting alongside Lords Rom and Ra in a war that will determine the destiny of galaxies. The Chalice of Carrie by Kahira O'Donnell is now available at KahiraO'Donnell.com or at Amazon.com.
This advertisement is neither an offer to lend nor a commitment to funding. Penn Funding is a marketing and information firm for businesses.
We needed cash, fast. Business is good, but this is an emergency.
We needed some new equipment. The banks wouldn't help us.
Need cash for your business? Call Penn Funding. We help small business stay in business. If you're in business 6 months with $10,000 per month in sales, you probably qualify. Call Penn Funding now. Call 800-783-3440. 800-783-3440.
I called Penn Funding and had my money fast.
Penn Funding helped me stay in business.
Penn Funding helped us grow.
Penn Funding can save your business. We can help you grow your business. Make the call now. If you need cash for your business, call Penn Funding. We help small business stay in business. Need cash for your business? Call 800-783-3440. 800-783-3440. 800-783-3440.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell. Boyd Purcell is our special guest. Dr. Boyd Purcell, that is our special guest. Here's two websites, www.christianitywithoutinsanity.com and healingspiritualterrorism.com. Boyd, always a great pleasure talking to you and having you share your valuable insight on what is happening in the world today. But let me ask you this, Boyd. This is based on your opinion, sir, are we in the end times as depicted in the book of Revelations?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, Rob. And that is, I've heard that all my life, growing up in Christian fundamentalism. I call myself a recovering fundamentalist, like recovering addict. But no, we're not in the end times, in my view. And interesting, you said the book of Revelations. That's how Christian fundamentalists pronounce it. Actually, there's no S on the Revelation. But so I say this in my book, Spiritual Terrorism. If you hear people say about Revelation says, Revelations, they're probably only repeating what they've heard about the book of Revelation, which is a very conservative, very literal interpretation of the Revelation. And the Revelation is probably the most highly metaphorical book in the world, at least one of them. It certainly is not literally true, and I can give examples of that, which
Please do, yeah.
makes sense. And for example, you probably heard, I wonder about my listeners, probably have, if they've gone up in any brand of conservative Christianity, about the lake of fire and brimstone.
Yes.
Where people get thrown into it at the end of life after being judged insufficient, not good enough to go to heaven, being condemned to hell forever by God, who is love. They'll be thrown into this lake of fire and brimstone, wherein they'll be tormented day and night forever and ever, right?
Yep.
Well, I have asked this question over the last 30 years to hundreds of people, laity and clergy, and virtually no one has heard of the meaning of the word brimstone. So the word brimstone.
Yeah. Now hold on here. Let me see if I recall. Brimstone was the burning of garbage.
Well, that was Gehenna.
Okay.
We get into that one, too. That's Mark 9. That was the city dump of Jerusalem.
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
Jesus used that in Mark chapter 9 as a symbol of hell. But here in the Revelation, he used fire and brimstone. Brimstone is the outdated word for sulfur.
Right.
Now, the next question I asked, by the way, only a retired chemist and one or two other people were able to tell me out of hundreds of people what the word brimstone means. So it's really lost its meaning for our culture today. But I had to look this up at age 45, and even being a graduate of a seminary with a Master of Divinity degree, and I still didn't know what brimstone was. But I always want to learn. So I went to Webster, and Webster says it's an archaic word for sulfur. Then I had asked, well, what difference would that make if this is a lake of fire and sulfur, or it should be, if you put fire and sulfur together, you get burning sulfur because sulfur burns very readily.
Right.
So the New International Version translates that as a lake of burning sulfur. Now, sulfur was widely known in antiquity for its medicinal value. It was taken internally for certain maladies. If you had a body sore, you can make a sulfur paste, rub it on it, or it would cure the body sore, it would cure a wound. And also, people burned it at home if someone died of an infectious disease to disinfect the house. They used it to disinfect the house with lice, mice, and vermin. They used it to sulfur the produce, to preserve it long before canning and freezing. Saints burned it in incense pots to symbolize prayers for purification. So every way was used in biblical times had a beneficent connotation. So what would a lake of burning sulfur symbolize? Since it's not literal, what would it symbolize? I've asked many dying hospice patients who are really terrified of dying and being judged by God and condemned to hell forever, being thrown into that lake of burning sulfur. And when I've asked them that, it's like the light bulb comes on in their mind, their eyes light up, and a smile replaces the scowl on their face, and they would say, well, that would symbolize divine healing or purification. And by the way, the word for sulfur in Greek is the word theon, and it's identical word for divine. So this is a divine lake of purification, not the lake of eternal gloom and doom. In a modern medicinal analogy, would be a fiery lake of penicillin to cure sin infection. I stated that in my book, Christianity Without Insanity. Does that make sense?
It does. So basically, what it's saying is that you're going to be purified before you go to heaven.
Exactly. Now, it said that hell is God's cosmic recycling center to transform sinners into saints. Because it may, in fact, be the very presence of God, because there are four biblical definitions of God. One is, everyone's heard this one, God is love. God is light. God is spirit. The fourth one is a big bugaboo. Both in the Old Testament and the New, it says that God is a consuming fire. That can't be literal. That symbolizes purification, transformation, the holy presence of God. By the way, the Zoroastrians, the Eastern religion, worship before an altar of fire. They've been accused of worshiping fire, but that's not true. That's a false accusation. They don't worship the fire. They worship God, who is symbolized by the fire. So I'm very interfaith in my orientation.
So you talk about spiritual terrorism as well. What is spiritual terrorism then?
Well, let me say what spiritual abuse is, which will lead into the terrorism. Spiritual abuse is using fear to coerce people, motivate them to do whatever the abuser wants them to do or not to do. And, of course, that gets into everything that's sin. In fundamental churches, like I grew up, you can't smoke, you can't drink, you can't go to a movie, you can't dance. You not have premarital sex relations, you go straight to hell for that. But even worse, if you just think about it, you go to hell for lusting in your heart. So as a boy, or girl for that matter, going through puberty, you never think a sexual thought. That is really horrific, terrible form of abuse. And the most extreme form of spiritual abuse is the spiritual terrorism. And in Christianity Without Insanity, I define the same kind of terroristic tactics and fear as spiritual insanity. And I'll give you a perfect example of that.
Please do.
Well, have you heard of Andre Yates, who murdered all 5 of her children in Houston, Texas in 2001?
Remember it well.
Okay, do you know why she murdered her children? When she was put in jail, a psychiatrist came to visit her and said, what is your understanding of religion? What does it have to do with you killing your children? And she said, the way I was raising them, they could never be saved. They were doomed to perish in the fire of hell. So she did, from that perspective, the logical thing of killing her children is send them unto heaven before they reach what's commonly called the age of accountability. In Protestantism, typically age 12, because that was the age Jesus went to the temple and said he had to be about his Father's business. So fundamentalists extrapolate from that to every child in the whole world, regardless of intellectual ability or whether they've ever heard the gospel, that they're going to be fully accountable as an adult to be judged by God and condemned to hell forever if they've not done everything exactly right. That is spiritual terrorism, and that's why Andrea Yates killed her, murdered her children.
So where does this spiritual terrorism originate from?
Well, it really originates from literalism and from the Christian church going off track. Without a doubt, as I've said, as surely as the grass is green, the sky is blue, God is in heaven and Christ is Lord, Jesus taught universal salvation. But that doctrine got perverted by the state church, the Christian church, becoming the state church of the Roman Empire. They happened early in the 4th century under Emperor Constantine, but the doctrine of universal salvation was not actually changed until the year 553. Now, we know that date exactly because that was the date that Origen, the church's first systematic theologian, was condemned as a heretic by the Christian church for believing in universal salvation. But the interesting thing about Origen being condemned, he was born in 185. He died in 254 at the age of 69. In 553, he would have been 368 years old. So he was condemned 3 centuries after his death. Why would the church do that? I've asked many people that question. That was to pervert the doctrine of the church from universalism, which it had believed for the first 500 years, to make the doctrine of eternal punishment the official doctrine, and to use fear to control the subjects of the Roman Empire to keep them in subjection to the emperor and the powers that be. So we've been living with that legacy for 1,500 years.
So basically, it was used as a control factor.
It was, exactly. The ultimate control factor.
So how much of religion that we still look at today, Boyd, is used as a control factor on the people? Is this where the expression, the Lord is my shepherd, comes from? Is the Lord as a shepherd the person who controls us? Or is the Lord as the shepherd the one who protects us?
Well, biblically, it's the one who protects us. And interestingly, some fundamentalists have taken this out of context about spare the rod and spoil a child. Remember, in the 23rd Psalm, it says, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. These were tools of a shepherd to ward off predators, lions and wolves and so on, that would attack the sheep. So it was protective. It was not coercive. It was not to beat the sheep and hurt them in any way.
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this question, Boyd, and please, I hope you take no offense. In the year 2016, do we need religion?
Well, we don't need religion at any time, and I do differentiate between religion and spirituality. Okay. Now, I wonder if your readers have heard anything about the rise of the nuns, not N-U-N-S, but N-O-N-E-S. Now, these are people who respond to religious surveys, what religion are you? And they check none of the above. Now, these are not bad people. Now, most have been reared in Christian churches, had the hell scared out of them. Yeah. At least they had a very negative experience, a lot of control factors and so on. So they just dropped out. They want nothing to do with organized, institutionalized religion, but they're good people. They may be very spiritual people. They may love their neighbors themselves and do good deeds and help others and so on. So they don't need church anymore. They're religion. And there's a huge difference between religion and spirituality. With spirituality, you can be kind, loving, giving, forgiving person, but you can be very religious and be non-loving, non-forgiving, hateful, contrary, and kill people in the name of God.
Boyd, stand by. You and I have to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. Fascinating topic, fascinating guest. Exo Nation, my guest this hour is Dr. Boyd C. Purcell. Here's a couple of websites. www.christianitywithoutinsanity.com and www.healingspiritualterrorism.com. Boyd and I will be back on the other side of this news break as we continue here in the X Zone on the Mutual Broadcast Network and on the all-new IPBN Radio Network.
Mutual Broadcast News, I'm Leo Ashcraft. Indiana child welfare officials have warned an organization that installed 2 baby boxes at firehouses where mothers can drop off unwanted newborns anonymously to remove them, saying they question their safety and whether women who use them could face child abandonment charges. 6 hospitals in Arizona have installed drawers in their emergency rooms that allow women to drop off infants anonymously, although state law neither authorizes nor prohibits them. Nearly 2 months after a woman was found severely burned on the Crow Indian Reservation, the tribe is still seeking information about the case from federal investigators. The victim was found on April 17th in a field near the border between the Northern Cheyenne and Crow Reservation with burns over most of her body. Doctors told the woman's family she had walked about 3 miles before collapsing. Reservation residents believe the woman was set on fire. Mutual Broadcast News. Depend on it.
Hi, I'm William Peckham, author of From Out of the Woodwork. If you enjoy a good mystery with a touch of the paranormal, then you'll love my new novel, From Out of the Woodwork. Sean Kennedy, a Toronto contractor, buys derelict houses, guts them, and turns them into multifamily dwellings, slums waiting to happen. When Sean buys 29 Livery Lane, a century house in ruins in central Toronto, and starts the renovation, the house fights back. He's visited by ghosts of owners past. His visions are triggered by touching an oak mantle, reading a faded letter, finding human remains in the dirt floor of the atrium, or opening a brand new casket found in the basement. These visions will take you on trips across southern Ontario, from Toronto to Niagara Falls, Niagara-on-the-Lake to Kingston. Visit the book page on my website and read a few pages from my novel, then order your copy. I hope you'll leave a message on my guest book while you're visiting. From Out of the Woodwork is now available from my website, in paperback or in your favorite electronic reader. I hope you'll enjoy the journey. Order now from my website, www.williamspeckham.com. That's www.williamspeckham.com.
Annie Callahan, dedicated to negotiating a position for Earth within the Daguerreonian Coalition, had trained for 3 years to become an Earth ambassador. Yet, the very eve of her arrival at the capital ruling planet, she is claimed as destined mate to an oversized, mating-maddened vamp who swears he will never release her. Lord Aztaran, king of the Macian sector, has waited over 900 years for his destined mate. Having found her as an alpha vamp, he is unable to relinquish Annie, virtually holding her hostage until he can claim her. Yet Macians cannot survive without their mate's love. How could he strip her of her citizenship, her ambassadorship, and her freedom and expect to win her heart? With All That I Am by Kahira O'Donnell is the latest book in this exciting series, The Daguerreonian Chronicles, guaranteed to keep readers coming back for more. With All That I Am by Kahira O'Donnell is available on Amazon.com and KahiraO'Donnell.com. Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifeology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com.
If your credit card bills have gotten out of hand, call Consolidated Credit now. If you're making the minimum payments, but your balance is just not going down, call Consolidated Credit now. If the interest rates on your credit cards are so high, it will take years and years to get out of debt. Call Consolidated Credit now.
800-750-8583.
They've helped over 5 million people with credit card debt. They can consolidate your debts into one lower payment, reduce your interest rates, and get you out of debt fast. If you're struggling with credit card debt, Consolidated Credit Programs will teach you how to get out and stay out of debt.
Call 800-750-8583. 800-750-8583. That's 800-750-8583.
Consolidated Credit Counseling Services Incorporated, 5701 West Sunrise Boulevard, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, 33313. Not a loan company. Licensed by the New York Department of Financial Services and by the Vermont Department of Financial Regulation. Maryland DM 19, Oregon DM 80031. Services are primarily educational in nature.
And welcome back, everyone. Dr. Boyd Purcell is my special guest this hour here in the X Zone. Here's a couple of websites: www.christianitywithoutinsanity.com. That's christianitywithoutinsanity.com, and healingspiritualterrorism.com. Boyd, what is gender dysphoria?
Well, that's a feeling that people have that they are a male trapped in a female body or a female trapped in a male body. Probably the most famous example of that is Bruce Jenner, who was decathlon champion, man's man. But he later felt like he would, I guess most of his life, felt like he's female, and now he has come out as a female Caitlin. This happens to people whether or not they may have had any gender assignment surgery. I've written an article about this and posted on LinkedIn, in that it used to be that when babies were born with mixed or partial genitalia, we know this as a fact, doctors would soon do what's called gender assignment surgery. And then that left some, as they grew older, feeling gender dysphoric. But doctors today, they have more enlightened ones, and I got to think all of them are at this point, they will wait until the child is older and is demonstrating what may be typically considered male-female characteristics before doing any such gender assignment. But, there's sexuality is a very complex thing. But I've written that religious conservatives especially live in a world that is black and white. It's up and down, hot and cold, in and out, male-female. Right. But in the real world, there's a lot of gray. And in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, it's basically the therapist's Bible, there are 46 pages of sexual and gender identity disorders. So I have postulated, I did research on this at Marshall University a quarter century ago, so I've written this article recently and updated with a bit of current information. But it appears that, at least my conclusion, I've not read this anywhere, but I believe that human sexuality is on a continuum, much like height, weight, IQ, and so forth. On one end, you have heterosexuals that are exclusively so in behavior and ideation. On the other end of the continuum, you have homosexuals who are exclusively homosexual in their behavior and ideation. In the middle are homosexuals. They're heterosexuals who fantasize about homosexual relationships, though they do not act on it. And they're homosexuals who fantasize about heterosexual relationships, but they do not act on that. So that's a whole continuum of different orientation and gender dysfunctions, and 46 pages of it in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders.
What is the Bible's take on homosexuality?
Well, the Bible in the Old Testament was much like the Quran and other religions where homosexuals were stoned to death. And there's really nothing worse in the Quran than what there is in the Old Testament. There's a lot of sexism and a lot of violence and intolerance, and we've had a lot of that throughout the centuries. So when we have Muslim killing homosexuals, that's no worse than Christians killing homosexuals, or Jews doing it in the Old Testament. And I saw online that there was a Christian fundamental pastor who said about those people still not dead, hopefully will survive in Florida, Orlando, 49 and died, 53 in the hospital, some still in, and a few in intensive care. He's praying that they won't survive, that God will kill them and send them unto hell, and we'll glorify God forever because the homosexuals are getting what they deserve.
All right.
That's horrible. That's religion. That's not spirituality.
All right. I can understand that. But isn't it strange that the Bible and the Quran actually agree on something?
Right. Well, I actually agree on more than that. They actually agree on some good things, too, about loving people and love your neighbors yourself. In fact, there's a version of the Golden Rule of what Jesus said, do unto others as you have them do unto you, or love your neighbors yourself. There's a version of that in Islam and in Hinduism and Buddhism and every religion which I'm aware. That is the universal golden rule.
So if there are so many similarities between the Bible and the Quran, how come we have this war that is going on? That, you know, the members of the Islamic faith follow Allah and Muhammad, and Christians follow Jesus Christ and God.
Well, the thing is that there's a lot of misunderstanding, and you have literalists who are fundamentalists in every religion. There's so much misunderstanding even about God. For example, you said Allah and God, and I've seen things on the internet about Allah is the moon god of Arabia. That's absurd. Allah is merely the Arabic word for God. Every language has a different word for God than what we have in English. The word God, G-O-D, does not appear in the Bible anywhere except in translation into English. So we're worshiping the same God, Allah or God, same one. In Hinduism, it's Brahman is the one supreme being.
But how do we know that how do we know for a fact there is only one God? Because in the Bible, in the book of Genesis, it said, and God said, let us create man in our image, in our likeness, using the plurality there instead of the singularity.
Well, that is a plural noun with a singular meaning. Christians take that to mean the Trinity, Holy Trinity, Jesus and the Holy Spirit were there as part of in that creation. Others would say that there actually was a belief in plural gods, which originally almost every human being believed, but gradually evolved out of that. And even the Eastern religions, which have been considered polytheistic, the belief in many gods, is really monotheistic, and that they have come to believe in Hinduism, the one supreme being is Brahman. So it's a matter of learning and growing and thinking, maturing spiritually, and realizing that we are all serving the same God. You know, if there are multiple gods, I really don't know of any religion that's teaching that today, but in the ancient world, that was a common belief.
If there is only one God, and all the pluralities that are used in God are for the singular God, why are there so many different religions?
Well, people see things differently. We have different perceptions, and I'll give you a good example of that. In my book, Spiritual Terrorism, I have a diagram or chart, which is, I may get part of this away by having to explain it, but if you just look at it, it's a square. And there are 16 squares in a box. And the question about the top of the page is, how many squares do you see? Now, I don't say how many squares are there, though there's a definite number, but how many do you see? Now, almost everyone immediately says 16. That's pretty easy. You can count 1 through 16, or 4 times 4 is 16. And then I said, well, what about the big square, the box? Oh, well, 17. They then see that. But then what about 2 by 2 squares make a square, or 3 by 3s make a square? So there may be as many as 29 we could see. And then I say, if one could see three-dimensionally, how many will that be? well, at least 288, but then if you can see combinations of those, that'd be almost an infinite number of squares. And so what we believe religiously is often the matter not what is not how many squares are there, but how many squares do we see.
So it's a matter of perception.
Less. Right, exactly. And then when we fight over, though, who sees more or fewer squares, or who sees different squares.
Just like which team is better. Perception.
Right. Or another one, you may have seen the old postage stamp from Germany about the old woman, young woman.
Yes. Yes.
I use that in spiritual terrorism, too, to ask, whom do you see in this sketch? And some people see the old woman, some people see the young woman. And then when you point out the other one, some people can see that, some still can't, or some can see that, but then they can't go back to seeing the other one. So it's all a matter of perception. And I do use those to help people understand it's a matter of perception. It's how seeing things as we are, not as things are. And yet many people don't make any extrapolation or any generalization from that to understand, having a better understanding of spirituality and religion.
So how does all this relate?
Wow, that's fantastic.
How does all this relate to the hot topic in the U.S. of transgender persons using public restrooms that correspond to the gender that they identify with?
Well, that's a very good question. And the thing, first of all, we need to do is realize there is a problem of gender dysphoria and transgender issues, where we probably have had transgender persons using public facilities for years, and it's never been a problem. But now this is something that fundamentalists have picked up on as basically a political wedge issue, combining this with gay marriage and abortion, and so another social agenda to get votes and get as conservative as possible politicians into office, so the gay people become victims of this. But
you know, those who are Christian, who believe the Word of God is in the Bible, it says Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve.
Right. I've heard that one.
Yeah.
So it appears that's that black and white world. But the fact is that I've said this, and this article wrote too, about human sexuality is determined by females receiving an X chromosome from each parent. Thus, persons considered to be normal females are born with XX chromosomes, while males are born with XY, the X from one's mother, the Y from father. But some females are born with a single X, while others are born with a triple X. Single X females are generally short in stature, infertile, and die young. Triple X females are generally taller in stature and are usually not infertile. Males may be born with a more common defect of double XY, or rarely triple XY, or XY/XXY, causing various abnormalities. Now, these are things we know scientifically. So it's not just a black-white, male-female issue. And if we'll just apply the golden rule, love others as ourselves, then we can resolve every social problem, including this one.
But it's not that simple. That will never happen.
Well, I believe it will happen. It may take a long time. It may take another 25, a quarter century, half century, or another century, or 1,000 years. But I believe the world is going to last as long as it takes for human beings to learn how to love each other as themselves and be reconciled to God and to one another. That's what I've stated in my books.
In theory, it's wonderful, but have we seen any proof that that can actually work in a realistic world?
Well, we do see some evidence of that. We see people being very open, and if you look at Orlando, there are people coming out, there are clergy who are being supportive, and people as a whole turn out to support these people, the loved ones, the family members, grieving the loss of their loved ones. So I think the majority are on board, and now we've had a Supreme Court ruling, especially that says that gay people can get married.
Yeah, but how much of this is just political, Boyd? You know, for example, these politicians who are coming out and giving their support to what happened in Orlando, the different members of the clergy who are coming out, the different members of the community, the media that is giving this vast attention. How much is sincere and how much is nothing else but a PR blitz?
Well, that only God knows. But I do believe we're moving in the right direction. More and more clergy are seeing and articulating a much more loving version of God. I don't know what's in any person's heart, but with the Supreme Court ruling, with actually a conservative Supreme Court, I think that was a giant step on the way to a society that's more loving and accepting and loving our neighbor as ourselves.
And yet there are still people, there are still states that are refusing to comply with it because it goes against their religious beliefs, their religious rights.
They do, and they claim that their rights being violated, which I think is a perversion of that. But you're infringing on the rights of people who are born different than we are, who had no choice whether they got a single X or a triple X chromosome or many other things. The thing we know, too, about this, part of my research and what I've written, is that there are babies born with extra chromosomes, which is a Down syndrome. Then there are also babies born with 46 chromosomes, some with 69, and even some with 92.
Right.
That's 4 times the number, and that's always a fatal condition. But then there are also children born with missing, bent, broken chromosomes, causing heart defects, diabetes, autoimmune disorder.
Yeah, and the list goes on and on and on.
Right.
But however, there are those who commit horrendous crimes, who are persecuted for their crimes, and we don't give them a pass because of their chromosomal differences.
Well, if you're talking about people who murder people, whatever reason, no, they're not getting a pay. Although, if they're shown to be mentally ill, they may well be sent to a mental institution rather than found guilty of murder. So there is some understanding among that. But I believe overall we're making progress as a society and moving in the right direction, and we'll get to the place eventually, however long it may be, that we will love each other as ourselves, be reconciled to God and to one another. I know things look terrible now, and they are.
Yeah. You know, I as a father and a grandfather, I don't want my children, my grandchildren, being subjected to this transgender society that we're turning into. I'm dead against it. I'm dead against it.
Well, I can understand, but really, the transgender issue, I think, is not the problem. For example, I saw a couple people interviewed on television. One was a transgender person who said she's a woman, even had a vagina, she said. She looked very feminine, and I don't think there'd be any problem with men if she were to go into a men's restroom, go in a stall, do her duty, go out. I wouldn't care. But the problem really is a man going into women and girls' restrooms. Right. And I saw a man interviewed, and this was a big burly man who had a full beard. And he said, according to his birth certificate, he was female. But he's transgender, and he wanted to go to the men's restroom. But if we get a law passed, which has been passed in North Carolina and maybe elsewhere, that you have to go to the restroom according to designation on your birth certificate, then that big burly man with a full beard is going to be going into your daughter or wife's restroom. And what do they say? Well, the women are frightened and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, ladies, but I'd rather not be here. I'd rather go to the men's restroom, but I'm only doing what the law requires me to do." That's not what we want, is it?
Or the law allows him to do.
Well, in this case, it'd be what they required him to do.
All right, stand by, Boyd. We've got to take our final break for this hour. Exonation Boyd Purcell is our guest. www.christianitywithoutinsanity.com and healingspiritualterrorism.com. We'll both be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away. How would you like to be able to read other people's minds? Well, the next best thing is here. When you know how to read a person's name, you know how the person thinks, feels, and behaves. Each letter in our name holds a key to unlock our true essence. Our name contains both our gifts and challenges in this lifetime. Nemology science discovers personality secrets hidden in the placement of the letters of our names, including the first and last impression people remember about us. Sharon shows us how to interpret the arrangement of letters as outlined in her book, Know the Name, Know the Person. Sharon Lynn Wyeth created nemology science after 18 years of research and testing her theories, and has supported thousands of people around the world in understanding themselves and others better. You'll enjoy Sharon's unique teachings as she shares her system to learn the gifts behind your given birth name. Even if you don't like your birth name, there are jewels in this book. If you're thinking of changing your name, ready to name your child, or wanting to get along better with others, this is the book for you. If you'd like to improve your relationships and change your life for the better, get the book today, Know the Name, Know the Person, or visit www.knowthename.com. That's www.knowthename.com. Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifeology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com.
Individuals and businesses with tax problems, listen carefully. Do you feel like you're losing control over your finances? If you owe over $10,000 in back taxes or have unfiled tax returns, we can help you take back control. The IRS is the largest and most aggressive collection agency in the world, and they can seize your bank account, garnish your paycheck, close your business, and file criminal charges. Take control of your tax problems now by calling the experts at Tax Mediation Services and take advantage of the Fresh Start program and new laws that may allow us to negotiate a settlement for the lowest amount possible. Our team of tax attorneys and enrolled agents can stop collections and get you protected so you can take control of your financial future. Tax Mediation Services is accredited by the Better Business Bureau. Call now for a free case review and a price protection guaranteed quote.
Call Tax Mediation Services now at 800-605-6818. That's 800-605-6818. 800-605-6818.
Welcome back, everyone. Dr. Boyd Purcell is our special guest this hour. www.christianitywithoutinsanity.com and www.healingspiritualterrorism.com. Boyd, what do you know, or what do you see that gives you so much hope for the future?
Well, there's some common sense things that are going on. For example, with this issue, which obviously is an important issue for you and a lot of other people, about the transgender issue. We now have some gender neutral and family restrooms, which are practical ways to solve this contentious issue.
Yes.
We probably need more of that. So we can solve it in that way, although I believe that we should allow transgender persons to go to the restroom that they, with which they identify with their sex, and pass a law making it illegal to impersonate transgender persons in order to use public facilities. But all societal problems can be solved by applying the golden rule, which I call loving spirituality, not bigoted religiosity. And let me give a personal example.
Sure.
Here, when my children were small, they're now about midlife, or they were very young, when my wife would take them shopping and they needed to go to the restroom, she would take our son and daughter into the women's restroom. I think almost all mothers do that, with sons as well as daughters. When I took them shopping and they needed to go, I would take them into the men's restroom.
Right.
I would take my daughter in and put her in the stall and stand outside the door to guard it so no one would get in. She did her business, help her adjust her clothes, and then leave. Now, many men saw me do that. I saw other men do that, fathers, and no one ever complained.
Well, no, that. Because back then it was a sign of a parent protecting their young, and every parent did the same. But now, having these transgender people going into the washroom that the courts have said that they could use, I think that this is not only wrong morally, but it's also wrong to make people have to tolerate this because of political correctness.
Well, the transgender person is not the problem, in my view. Anyone could impersonate a transgender person in order to go into a restroom and harm someone. For example, I saw on the news that there was a child in, I believe it's San Diego, where he was taken shopping by his aunt, and I think he was 10 years old. His aunt thought he was maybe a little too old to take him to the women's restroom, so she took him to the men's restroom, was stood outside, waiting for him to come out, and he never came out because someone had killed him in the restroom and stabbed him to death. And then I saw in Utah, there was a man who took his young daughter into the men's restroom, as I took my daughter, and he was accosted and was attacked by the person, the bigot, who said it was wrong to take a young girl into the men's restroom. So let's just live and let live. Love our neighbor.
I don't know. I believe in free will. I believe in free thinking. I believe in doing unto others. But when it comes down to transgender, having men go into ladies' washrooms and ladies going into men's washroom, I think that the art of political correctness has gone way overboard. Boyd, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Great having you with us here on the X Zone. Look forward to the next time you meet with us here. X Zone Nation, Boyd Purcell has been my guest this hour. www.ChristianityWithoutInsanity.com. I am Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. We'll be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away.